The gentleman from California is recognized for his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment is very simple. It inserts language expressing opposition to the Abolish the ATF Act of 2023, which would eliminate the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. Immediately after that bill's enactment, it expresses opposition to that bill as a dangerous effort to defund the police and harm local law enforcement. And just in case members are unfamiliar with what we would be abolishing under that legislation, the ATF's responsibilities include investigation and prevention of federal offenses involving the unlawful use, manufacture, and possession of firearms and explosives. I was led to believe for many years that the Republican mantra was, we don't need any new gun laws, we should enforce the ones that we have. But apparently today they don't even want those laws enforced. More than that, the ATF also combats illegal trafficking of alcohol and tobacco. I guess my GOP friends don't think we should be doing that either. The ATF also operates a fire research laboratory where they examine ways of detecting criminal arson. I guess we want to abolish their ability to do that. ATF uses its legislative mandate to investigate and recommend prosecution of offenders to reduce the level of violent crime and hence public safety. I guess we want to abolish those efforts. ATF strives to increase state and local awareness of available federal prosecution under the statutes and works to curb the illegal use of firearms, enforce firearm laws. ATF issues firearms licenses. I guess we don't want to issue any firearms licenses anymore either. They also work on combating the import, manufacture, and dealing in explosive materials. So I guess we're going to abolish those efforts. As well as the special response teams, which are elite tactical groups that respond to high-risk law enforcement operations. So we don't want them to be able to do that in conjunction with local law enforcement. So that's what that bill would do, Mr. And I'm happy to yield to my Republican colleagues if they want to express support for Mr. Gaetz' efforts to defund the ATF. Would any of my Republican colleagues like to express their support for Mr. Gaetz' efforts to defund the ATF?
I think we're going to get to that.
I
think we're going to get to that,
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jordan, would you like me to yield to you, express your support for Mr. Gaetz' legislation to defund the ATF?
I'm going to yield to Mr. Gaetz.
No, I'm yielding to you, Mr. Jordan.
Well, I'm going to listen to Mr. Gaetz' compelling arguments that I know will be coming, and then we will have a debate.
Reclaiming my time, I'd be happy to yield to you for the purpose of yes.
I appreciate your willingness.
Mr. Jordan, if you let me finish.
I will.
It is my time. I'm happy to yield to you for the purpose of saying yes or no, whether you support Mr. Gaetz' efforts to defund the ATF. Do you, Mr. Jordan?
I support Mr. Gaetz' effort to send a message to the ATF, which is what he said
so
just a few minutes ago in the debate.
You support the legislation to defund the ATF?
I didn't say that. I said I support his efforts to send a message to the
ATF.
The
bill that Mr. Gaetz has introduced
changed the rule after 10 years of telling American citizens
that it would abolish, it would eliminate the Bureau immediately after enactment. Do you support that, Mr. Jordan? Yes or no?
I've given my answer.
Do you support it?
I've given my answer.
Yes or no, Mr. Jordan?
I've given my answer, Mr. Schiff.
Okay, I guess your answer is you don't support it, or you're afraid to say that you do. But I'm happy to yield to Mr. Johnson, or Mr. Biggs, or Mr. McClintock, Mr. Tiffany, Mr. Massey, anyone. Anyone else like to join Mr. Gaetz? And anyone like to express their support for Mr. Gaetz' effort to abolish an entire federal law enforcement agency? Anyone over there? Mr. Issa, do you support abolishing the ATF?
Thank you for yielding.
It's a yes or no, Mr.
You and I have served here for almost 22 plus years.
Reclaiming my time, I'm not getting a yes or no from anyone.
I was getting to that.
Well, yes or no.
I'm sorry,
yes
but
or no, Mr. Issa.
What I was saying is
yes
that
or no?
it took 22 years to see you conducting a deposition of your colleagues, and I appreciate
reclaiming
it,
my
Mr.
time.
Attorney.
You ask us all the questions.
Well, and what's the answer, Mr. Jordan?
From Arizona,
what's the answer? Do you support abolishing the ATF, Mr. Jordan?
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate this interest in the legislation I've offered, and many of the features of government that are important that Mr. Schiff points out occur in other areas. They don't occur only in the ATF. Now, the ATF is an agency that has totally exceeded any sense of authorization. And by the way, it's not even an authorized entity of government. It just continues to get funded. And what have they done with that funding? Not according to me, but according to the Department of Justice's own Inspector General, they have failed to secure their facilities, and then they have violated people's civil liberties and rights by maintaining electronic records that they have no legal authority to maintain. Did they do that to just a few of them?
Will the gentleman
No,
yield?
hundreds of thousands of times they broke the law.
Mr. Gaetz,
and the
would you yield?
reason that that's problematic
Time
in a
belongs to the gentleman from
circumstance
Florida.
in
Mr.
which
Gaetz.
the ATF continues to grow beyond their limits is because
Gaetz, would
they
you
are
yield?
now imposing on, I'm defending my bill, Mr. Schiff, they are now imposing on regular Americans a sense of zero tolerance that isn't for public safety. They're putting people out of business, like those who are contacting each of our offices who have some Scrivener's error or technical violation that oftentimes isn't even the fault of the individual that the ATF is bringing hellfire down on from a regulatory sense. So yes, I do believe that the current structure of the ATF is absolutely not worth vindicating or funding or continuing in its operational setting.
In that case, would you yield, Mr. Gaetz?
I'll yield, Mr. Schiff.
Ms. Gaetz, can you identify any of your Republican colleagues on this committee who are supporting your bill?
Well, I can identify one, and then I'll get back to my remarks. Mr. Biggs is a co-sponsor. I don't know if anybody else is. I'd invite your co-sponsorships,
Okay, so
frankly. There are people here supporting. Look, we're going to
So
see
there
in the
are
vote.
two
but the
Republican
important
members
thing is,
who favor abolishing the
Gentlemen,
entire
I
police
pretty much every
agency.
support. I tell you what, you can get on the
Any other
legislative format.
takers?
I control the time. See, cannot meet those functions, and that's a position that's held not just by me, not just by my co-sponsors, some of whom, at least one of whom, is on this committee. It's something that, at least in the factual articulations of the deficiencies of the agency, is articulated by inspectors general. There's also a GAO report. There's also a GAO report that goes over records maintenance that excoriates the ATF, and that is also not a partisan entity. That is a nonpartisan entity that has a watchdog.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
I'll yield.
If you acknowledge that there are multiple functions that the ATF currently performs that should not be abolished, wouldn't it have made sense to say in your bill, other than we're abolishing the ATF immediately, to provide some sort of transition for those functions to other agencies, to transition for the funding,
I would
pending cases
I would say that
are in court?
is certainly something I'd be willing to work with you on. I'm open-minded as
I
to
don't
the
want to get
transfer
rid of the
those
ATF,
functions.
so I'm not working
Well, that's
with
the
you on
problem,
that.
right? You don't want to get rid.
We can-
Democrats, I'm sorry, I'll address the chair as we're entitled to do. My objective here with House Democrats is to try to build a system that adheres to the values that many House Democrats used to espouse regarding protecting individuals from too much government surveillance and too much government overreach. And the ATF has done that. That has been the conclusion of
सारे सामने ते अल्लाह ताला इस मौका हमेशा कायम रखे साड़ी सियासत दा मकसद ये कि इंशाअल्लाह असी इस मोहब्बत का कायम रख सका असी सियासत तो और कुछ नहीं करना तुसी साड़ी सियासत आज नहीं पूछता तो देखने पे कि असी सियासत ने की पढ़ाया सवाए थोड़े दिल मोहब्बत दे सवाए थोड़े दिल प्यार दे असी सियासत ने कुछ नहीं पढ़ाया और इंशाअल्लाह साड़ी सियासत हमेशा इंशाअल्लाह एक हो जाती बाकी थोड़े जो मसले मसाइल ने वो असी सारे समझते हैं इतने जो गैस का मसला आया इस पास सड़क उस पार सारे मसाइल असी थोड़े हल किए बिना लगाल मेरा ना आया इस पास मेरा ना आया दो एक थोड़े हल किए उस तो इकतदार का भी कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है उस तो वोटर का भी कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है साढ़े इंशाल्लाह जो भी साढ़े को हाथ कोई शह आती एक गल अपने दिले पे लकीर बना लो साढ़े हाथ कोई शह होती इंशाल्लाह मुट्ठी कोशिश सब तक पहले से होती वोट जो इलेक्शन आया पे इस इलेक्शन तुसी सारे भरावा बड़ा सोच समझ के और अपने इख्तियार मोहब्बत का कायम रख के फैसला करना है और इंशाल्लाह इस कड़ियाल कामयाब करना है उसे भी कड़ियाल करना है और पहले भी कड़ियाल करना है तो एक दसो इंशाल्लाह हाथ खड़े करके दसो इंशाल्लाह मैं इस बात से आखना कि चंगेज खान से मेरे दरम्यान एक चीज जी बड़ी मुतफिक है और वो चीज ये कि ऐसा दुआ तुम देखा है कि बगैर वोटा बगैर इकदार बगैर